Good morning and welcome, Salah and Rajan. Thank you so much for the time, and I'm really happy that we managed to coordinate our schedules and our agenda. Now, I met Salah in 1998. Correct me if I'm wrong, Salah. That is some time ago, during my time in Egypt. A time which was very critical to Egypt because there was the first attack in Luxor, there was an economic crisis, and Salah back then was running a multi-million-dollar business and formed part of the young entrepreneurs seeking a renaissance of the way business is conducted. And when Salah was speaking, people were listening. And he was often sought of for advice. And I'm humbled that I had the opportunity to accompany Salah during this difficult time. And I learned a lot from him, and we exchanged many ideas. And so I'm still happy to be part of Salah's journey. Rajan, on the other hand, I met with my work as president of Novam International Malta, where I wrote a couple of community engagement projects, but also in our work of bringing communities together and fostering community cohesion, fighting racism and bringing a deeper understanding how people across the globe can work together. I recently met Rajan at the House of Commons because he was moderating the last event about the Commonwealth. Where do we go from here? So welcome to you both, and it's a pleasure to introduce you both to our communities. Now, Salah had developed a critical thinking assessment tool. Salah's focus is on critical thinking, whereas Rajan's focus is on exploring humanness across the globe, but especially among the Indian communities around the globe. Can you share a bit about your work to the communities? Because I'm sure my introduction left a lot of gaps. And what excites you most? What are you most excited about what you do?
Rajan?
I was going to say, I'll let Salah go first. He looks far more prim and proper than I. So Salah, I shall stand in your shadow.
Okay, that's fine. So my name is Salah Khalil. I'm Egyptian. I started working on this idea of the importance of 21st century skills in the face of the ever-growing influence of artificial intelligence. That's going to change the way we handle knowledge, the way we handle employment, and the way we handle skills. So this is at the center or at the heart of the next global crisis, which is going to be a skills gap and crisis, as indicated by the World Economic Forum, OECD, UNDP, IMF, and some of the large corporate giants as well, such as PricewaterhouseCoopers, Conferry, IBM, and most of those people who concur that by 2030 there's going to be at least a third of the global workforce, which amounts to about 1 billion people, that will need some form of skilling, upskilling, or reskilling to stay ahead of the game as an effect of as AI takes over the economy and starts to change education from knowledge-based education to skills-based education. The same with employment, and also as it overtakes skills that human beings have been investing a lot of funds and a lot of time in doing. What excites me is this is at the heart of intelligence and at the heart of disinformation, malinformation, and misinformation, all used to sort of counter what Rajan is interested in, which is humanism, you know, and you know, the idea of dehumanizing people. What the work that I'm doing really excites me because you know, better thinking leads to better societies in general. So this is really what drives me, and this is what I've been working on, both as a company in Macat International Limited and as a charity in the Alexandria Trust as well, which is a UK charity.
Thank you, Salah. It's really, I mean, it's it gives us more understanding in what you do and what moves you. Rajan, I mean,
Sure.
you come from a different perspective, and what excites you? What inspires your work? And can you share a little bit about your work, because you're not only the founder of the Global Indian series, but you are also the director of from Nazran Roth, which is a consultancy firm, and you have ties to Malta as well. So which led you to Malta, and you're interested in sports and human development. Can you share a little bit about your work and what inspires you to do what you're doing? Because you have many hats like me, like the both of us, like the three of us, no? We are people of many different hats and cannot be easily compartmentalized in one corner.
You have a very infectious smile there, Maria. I can't help but smile when you speak. So what I do is really simple. I kicked off the Global Indian Network a few years ago. I'm an explorer. That's my background. I moonlight as an entrepreneur, but my main priority is to kind of see the world as it is rather than how I am. I've been to over 70 countries with the work that we do at the Global Indian Network. And the idea is to re-look at the globe to the concept of identity. What does identity mean? How does it impact the way that we look at each other? How does it impact the conversations that we have? And so what we decided to do was to help demystify that and take it away from the political realm, which we often see as almost degrading our humanness, something that Salah was hinting towards, and saying, well, why don't we just have a conversation? What we do a range of podcasts now from around the world. So we have private distribution with a lot of heads of states that get involved with us, a lot of ministers as well as CEOs. We do long form journalism that appears in national newspapers around the globe as well. We do documentaries, and the whole aim of what we do is change the world one conversation at a time. I like what Salah mentioned earlier, because it is a critical step within our journey as a species to say, well, what comes next? The advent of AI. What are we left with when we have things that can think better than us in most cases, speedier than us for the commercial world? Well, then it leaves us this idea saying, well, what does it mean to be human? And that's what we dedicate ourselves to. Nazran Roth is our global consulting firm. We support governments, countries, as well as individuals to go further. But we always do things with integrity and our utmost dedication as well.
Thank you so much for your very comprehensive introduction, Rajan. And apart from being blessed to have you in my life, so in my work as well, I'm a deep admirer, and I'm always feeling deeply inspired when coming out of a meeting of both of you. And I hope our viewers are inspired as I am with our conversation, what we bring today. Now, you shared a little bit about your work and your interests, but what interests me and maybe what helps us a little bit understanding a little bit deeper. What had inspired you to this journey in the first place?
I'll tackle this one then, Salah. We'll take turn by turn. For me, it was frustration, in all honesty. I think because I was traveling a lot at the time, we did a lot of stuff with the media, and you hear these ideas that shape people's opinions of each other, and they're not necessarily right. And I have to admit, in a horrid way, when I was younger, I used to have this belief about the globe, about certain communities, because I was from a very small area in the UK. When I started to travel, I started to meet people. I've had the privilege of going to Egypt, for example, and Moses is a good friend of mine, a former Minister of Tourism. And you start finding out more about different cultures and what defines them. You realize, wow, I got it all wrong. And not only did I get it all drastically wrong, what impact did that have? Not just on me, but on entire communities who don't trust each other, who don't know about each other. Or what impact does it have on businesses, economies, where people's livelihoods are at stake? And so that's kind of what led me down to this area. It was my road to Damascus moment, which made me think I want to see the world as it is rather than I am. And if we are on this planet, well, we have to be a voice of good. We have to be a voice of change. Otherwise, what is the point? So for me, that change came from a totally selfish point of view of frustration, saying the world has to be a better place for all. What do I need to do to make it happen? And how can I make sure that I can just not only transport myself, but also everybody else along that journey?
Salah, moving from an entrepreneur, running an empire in the Middle East, not only in the Middle East, but also you were Egyptian American paint industries, and with a huge load on your shoulders, building up in a time of economic crisis. What moved you from a manufacturing empire to what you're doing today? What was the inner journey that happened? Because when we worked together, we discovered that your heart and your mind was always in education, actually, which is so different from the work that you were doing then. So what was the inspiration to move from Atamea Maati to London and to build up one of the most acknowledged assessment tools in critical thinking? What was the inspiration? Why did you do what you do? Drop everything, run to London, start social economic studies, and so that was a quantum leap. What happened?
So, like Rajan, we share a common humanity, right? And as he was sort of in his microcosm, so was I in a different microcosm. So I was also in a family business that dealt in chemicals, paints in Egypt, insecticides in Saudi Arabia. My father wasn't the greenest person on earth. So I was part of this family, and I was the one son, and I had 4 sisters. So basically, as a Middle Eastern family, the son, obviously, although I'm number 4 in the order of birth, I still get the sort of the heaviest load of the family. So I had to come back from whatever I was doing as a degree and help my family and stay in the family business. And I did this for 13 years. And I think the trigger was when I started working with you, Maria, and we started looking at things in a completely sort of objective way, devoid of emotions, just really looking at things as they are factually, using techniques that would help clear my mind and open up avenues that made me look into what is my biggest fears, what are the things that make me happiest. And I think came to a point where I found out what people have found out for many years, but I found it out for myself, and I think that work with Maria helped me find this out. And it is happiness of others is what makes me most happy, really. And there isn't anything that I can do, other than helping people get the best possible education and the best possible abilities and skills to become, equal members in society and lead happy lives. And that's really what. So it's kind of a combination of where is my true happiness, lasting happiness, not temporary one, lies, and also a combination of how this is related to severe injustices. You have so many people, you have 7+ billion people on the planet. A very small percentage of these get education. Even a smaller percentage of these get good education. Even a tinier percentage of these get great education. And then you end up in a perpetual elite environment that is exclusionary, that in a way, even in a subtle way, dehumanizing, because it already sets out what the trajectory of people in, and only those who can find their way through this maze of injustice and break through the veils of society manage to really make a difference and help people. So that's really that was my inspiration. Essentially, I found someone that I can trust, that I can have a human-to-human conversation with, and that was Maria. And she helped me leave the microcosm of the family business, go into politics, from politics, go do my master's, and from my master's set up MCAT and set up the Alexandria Trust, and really go in a completely, take my life and my family's life in a completely different direction.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for your kind words, Salah. And I'm really, as I said, I'm humbled that you gave me this trust. And also, I mean, you're also a father of 4, and you were a source of inspiration to all 4 of your children who have now successful careers. And what I want to lead to, you started focusing on critical thinking. Can you extend a little bit on that? Why was that?
Sure.
Why did that matter?
Sure. My starting point was, what is a great education? And the great education, you end up looking at the elite, academic institutions such as Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Oxford, Cambridge, and find out when people, go to these organizations, what are the essential conditions that make these organizations what they are. And essentially, if you boil, it's the condition that if you take out, the organizations cease to be who they are. And there were 3 main components that I focused on. One is brilliant students, so really very smart, very well-prepared students. Second is outstanding professors or teachers. And third is seminal content. So content that has passed the canons of science, content of amazing critical thinkers, right? And the net product of this trinity is you end up with an individual who has independent critical thinking. So they can actually take something on their own and they can think critically about it and add, they have idea fluency, they have an ability to not only generate a large number of ideas, but also to evaluate information, evaluate ideas, evaluate concepts in a way that is constructive and in a way that is productive. So I thought of combining those 3 things. If I can combine those 3 things and package them in a product that enhances and measures critical thinking, I would have done something that could perhaps lead into a much bigger process. Meanwhile, all the international organizations were talking about the 4 Cs and the importance of the 4 Cs, including critical thinking, creativity, and communication and collaboration with machines. So I just happened to be number one, focused, and number two, lucky, as sometimes it happens, right?
You're very humble, yeah, Salah. You're really too humble, because the tool you developed is quite outstanding, and you're introducing this in now many universities in the Middle East. And I hope this also will take up in Europe and in the United States. You had already steered some steered some interest, very important interest, which I am actually in awe that in a world which is highly competitive. So very well done, Rajan. In your experience of working within your own communities and as an explorer, as a developer of people's mindsets and working with humanness, how do you think the exploration of humanness can inform the development of critical thinking tools?
That's a very good question. Where do I begin? I think let's start from the beginning. We're born on a planet, not a country. So that's the most important thing. So to not even spend any educational years speaking about that fact is a crazy phenomenon. We teach kids at school about the ideas of being patriotic. We teach kids and children at school about the idea of the other, what culture means and traditions and religions. But the very fabric that connects every single sentient being, especially humans on this planet, we speak nothing about. And that to me is absolutely flabbergasting. It makes no sense whatsoever. I really like the idea of critical thinking because before, as you know, I was a mentor coach for the Indian Olympic team. I've done a lot of things along my journey so far. The idea of being able to rationalize, to look at the world as it is rather than how we are, and to inform ourselves through lived experiences is a powerful tool, because not only does it give people, engenders them a great self-belief in knowing who I am, and what I'm heading for, but it also provides empathy. It also gives people an understanding of what other communities are going through. It reshapes our way of economic policies. It reshapes the way that we look at social change. So the idea of humanness, rather than making a research study of academia, is something that lives within all of us, but it's something that we never deep dive in. I like what Salah pointed out earlier, which is something very close. It's saying you're only going to know what the human experience is by delving into it by yourself, having to go through the blood, sweat, tears, or whatever other mechanisms you have. And then when you realize it, the world changes. It has more vibrancy. You get frustrated more because you realize that the world has to change for the better. But once your heart starts beating and you feel it and your mindset is in congruence to that, I think you start realizing that all of us are mechanisms of change of something larger. So in short, I think we need to study more about what it is to be human. We need to take away from just the pure academic research of it, leaving the lies of sociology and applied psychology behind and saying, well, what really defines this experience? And then from there, utilizing the areas of critical thinking in the sense of saying, how do I now redefine the world? And how can I use logic as a way of making decisions? And then on that side, you can start building better societies. We can start building better economies that not only service a few, but service to all. So that way, we lead ourselves into a world where all are born equal and some are not more equal than others, as a famous book says.
Thank you very much, Rajan. This gives us a lot of food for thought. A question to both of you. what role do you think do cultural perspectives play in your respective fields, both of your respective fields? And how can these enhance our viewers' personal and professional development or the line of business?
Okay. Well, I think I like what Rajan said about identity. I think it is important to know, who you are, and, to really delve deep, understand the pillars of your identity. And a big part of that is culture. So, the influence of culture. I can give you an example. I'm Egyptian, but the pillars of my identity are African, Asian, ancient Egyptian, Euro-Mediterranean, Arab, Muslim, Coptic Christian. So, it's such a vast. It just happens, by sheer luck. I was born Egyptian, right? What are the chances that this happens to me personally? I have no idea. I'm not a mathematician, so I wouldn't be able to calculate it, but it happened. Now, I have a choice. I have a choice to say, well, my main pillar is Arab. My main pillar is African. My main pillar is ancient Egyptian. Or I have a choice to enrich myself from each and every pillar and see what it has to offer that is reasonable, that is productive, and that helps me become a better critical thinker, a better person, a better human being, and take it from there. So that's one. I mean, starting from within before you go outwards, I think is really, that's what critical thinking is all in a sentence. It's thinking about thinking. It's really holding. I mean, I went to boarding school in Scotland, and we had a reunion with what they call old boys. I mean, the white hair gives me away, I'm afraid. So I went to school almost 40 years ago, right? So when we met together, we said, what is it that this school has done to us, really, to make us who we are today? Because it did play a role as well. I mean, even Scotland, I mean, some people in Scotland consider me Scottish because I was part of a family in Scotland. My guardian recently passed away, and I was like giving the eulogy there. This is like a Scottish family for me. So what is it? And we all agreed that when we were walking in these boarding schools, we had mirrors around us all the time. So every action that you did, you can see a reflection of yourself in it. So there was no chance for, rubbish or fluffy stuff. There was always someone calling you out if you did something. If it's a teacher, it was kinder. If it's a student, sometimes it's kinder. Other times it's less kinder. But in essence, that's what it is. It was always looking inwards and trying to manage the ego, keep it in check, and looking at what others are doing. So that's really my own sort of take on your very complex question. Of course, there is no way that my answer even covers a speck of what the question entails, because I know how you think. You have a huge, it's like an iceberg. You just gave me the tip of the iceberg, and I just answered the tip of the iceberg. But if we go into it, of course, we'll be here for a century to try to cover all this topic, right?
Well, you know me, Salah. I'm a complex thinker, but the purpose is to let also our viewers think a little bit further than usual. And Rajan, what is your thought and idea? Sorry for the challenge.
No, it's a really good question. And I guess in short, there's 8 billion different ways to think of it. because every individual have a look at what culture means to them. I love how Salah placed it, that we are almost like the ministerial bodies within ourselves. We have a minister of defense, we have a prime minister, we have a minister of health, but we've also got other ministries that are probably less competent, a bit like the British government. But I'll put that on the side. The question is cultural perspectives. Now, for us, that's a huge thing, because part of the work that we do is saying, well, how do you define the culture of a nation? Not only for business, but also saying, how do you understand the other? So look at the cultural nuances they're just vital. And it's superficial things, looking at how language is formed through to business culture, etiquette, but then it takes a deeper dive in terms of how people think, how people are critical, what is the understanding, what are the mechanisms. Then it takes another layer of the onion skin, which is what you're delving me into, saying, well, how well can we communicate that across, which is more of for the business purposes, that cultural competence of knowing if I'm doing business in Nigeria, what are the mechanisms of decision making that will be different compared to doing business in India, compared to doing business in Malaysia or Singapore? But that's the commercial world. Where your listeners are going to be interested in, and I think both Salah and I are very fascinated in, is when you move away from this dynamic and you come to this dynamic, the individual point of view. That's where I get really fascinated by these ideas from. Because as Salah mentioned, in his own cultural definition of that encyclopedia of him, there's so many different variables. And the same is true for every other human being. Whether we acknowledge those variables is a different question. And that's something that I think we need to be doing as people. So now we live in a world where identity politics is rife. Governments are using it left, right, and center. The media has used it left, right, and center. And businesses are jumping on the backbone of that. We are now living in an environment where your very focus of identity can either be used against you or be used to pull you in towards some type of mechanism. Which means if there's ever a time to understand what the human identity is and what creates the human identity and what anchors it, is going to be now. What Salah mentioned earlier about AI, deeply fascinated as well, because what do we now do? We have machine learning that can aggregate the human mind in terms of experiences or data inputs and bring it out. So then what are we left with? Now we're left with people who have to deeply think to themselves, what is my purpose and where am I heading to? When we look back in the history books, especially all big giant revolutions, it's become a job loss, but it's also because people are no longer validated and people are worried and people are upset and there's fear. So coming back to the cultural perspectives of that, if we take it on a national, international level and look at the human exposed experiences of it, now it becomes a fundamental part in our history as human beings on the back of the planet.
That is very deep, Rajan. I have get to know you as a very deep and vast thinker who really brings value to the communities you serve, as well as you, Salah. Now, wrapping it up and looking at the theme of our discussion today, which is bridging perspectives, exploring humanness, and enhancing critical thinking across cultures. How can businesses leverage this for the development of new strategies of gaining competitive advantage? Apologies for this very challenging question, but we have a tendency to separate business with person. I still am the opinion we are, whether what we do, whether we run a commercial business, whether we are a family person, it is always us who carries ourselves. So, and I personally feel the way we conduct our business reflects a lot on how we think. So again, bridging perspectives, exploring humanness, and enhancing critical thinking across cultures. How does this tie up, or how can businesses leverage this knowledge for their strategic development and competitive advantage?
Would you like to go first, Rajan?
Sure. I'll go first with this one. It is a very difficult question to answer because part of it is saying, well, how do you what you're really asking is how do you take what makes us human and commercialize that for businesses? And part of me is like, well, that's a very difficult question because it depends what type of business you are. Because it has to be a world of ethics, it has to be a world of integrity. And we place a great reliance on the integrity of leaders within, if it's corporate world or political world. But time and time again, we've seen that that reliance has been misplaced. Coming back to the question in a totally mercenary way, which I don't want to think, I think it's for businesses to understand one, in a globalized environment where you have labor forces from right the way across the world, do you understand your labor well enough? Because that way you can help in terms of unleashing productivity. Secondly, for globalized environments where now businesses are no longer just operating in the likes of Egypt, they're going to Saudi Arabia, or you got businesses from Malaysia going to Uganda. Do you understand more about the cultures and the decision making and working life of those nations that you're now looking to be part of? That is vital for the business success. Realistically, as business owners, what do we need to know? We need to know our audience. We need to know our clients. We need to know how they think, what they think, and how to maneuver them from A to B in most cases. So that way, understanding the cultural nuances along that and how it impacts decisions is vital. What I think we need to do more of, though, and to make your question a bit broader, is saying, well, what impact does that have on the planet at large? Because now in globalized environments where a decision-making process in the UK, especially us guys, Global Indian Network, where we deal with not just the Indian diaspora, but the world at large, you know, we've got big audiences behind us. We have to think, what conversations are we having here? And how does it echo to another part of the world, like Vanuatu, for example? And how does it engender greater belief? How does it inspire change? So as business owners, if you're taking the commercial world, you have to be thinking, what decisions am I taking? How are those decisions formed? Are there a cultural phenomenon of me? Do I have unconscious biases behind it? And then from that angle, how is it now going to impact not only the communities that my business serves, but also how's it going to impact the communities in which my business belongs to? And understand that whole cultural chain, because we can no longer bury our heads in the sand. We could do that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, we could do it. But now when we look at the globe at large, we look at the wars that are taking place, we look at climatic actions, we are seeing that there's a golden thread that connects us far deeper than ever before. So my take on that question is that type of area of thinking.
That is a very inspirational response, Rajan, which necessitates a lot of in-depth exploration to really grasp what you just said, and it involves the interest of social and economic well-being, not only for self, but also for the communities businesses serve. So that requires a shift of interest, in my personal opinion.
Maria,
So,
absolutely. We have to shift the way that we see the world. We're no longer part of our ideas of tribes. We're no longer just part of the UK. We're part of the planet. So therefore, all our actions have a counter action for everybody else. We have to be sentients of change. You know, so I agree. It sounds like this great grand idea, but it's only because I traveled and because we host these big conversations, your mind has the ability to start shifting, to start feeling, and you grow further mentally. We have to shift the way that business is done. No more of this green bonding or blue things. It has to actually make people feel that there's a change happening. Sorry, that's my Jerry Springer moment right there. I'll put myself back on mute.
Salah, what is your take on this question I just placed? And how can people leverage this potential, actually combined humanness and critical thinking across cultures?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways to look at this. I think one sort of perspective is sort of the world that we live in right now, and then the visions of post-humanism. So essentially, as AI becomes more prevalent, a lot of the jobs that do not require human skills are going to be taken over by AI, which means that this is going to be the age, although it's called post-humanism, it's actually going to be the age of humanism, because that's where we distinguish ourselves from AI, being human. So I would say that this is the first thing just to talk about, and it's a positive thing. That means humanism is going to be a much larger part of our daily life, and therefore will be the source of competitive and comparative advantage for companies as well. Let me explain this a little bit deeper. Take the opposite of humanism, dehumanization, for example, and take the objectifying women, let's say. As I know that this is a very sort of controversial topic, but let's just take that. I mean, I have a mother, I have sisters, I have a wife, I have daughters, so I am connected to women in so many different ways, that I can see that in certain instances they face objectifying, whether it is people objectification, whether it is people see women as animals or people see women as objects. Yeah. If a company has a deeper understanding of dehumanization, and I'm talking here about how it happens, what is the process, what are the social targets of dehumanization, who is dehumanized, and what are the consequences, sort of pro-social, social, moral judgments, and what can be done to reduce it. Now, take all this in a package, and where a company treats its employees in that way, where shareholders treat their management in a certain way, and where governments and shareholders interact on the same playing field, this could be a huge comparative and competitive advantage. All organizations are about the mobilization of bias. This is the cornerstone of, when we go to university, all we are taught is about the identification and elimination of bias. When we go to the working place, whether we work for one organization or another, we are there to mobilize a bias. If it's a company, we're mobilizing a bias towards profit and shareholder value. If it's a charity, we're mobilizing bias towards impact and making donors happy and making sure that we can continue to get funding. If we're a government, we're mobilizing bias for votes, and so on and so forth. So here is the most important element of all this, is that the mobilization of bias takes place in the public interest. That's really where you will build lasting competitive and comparative advantage as a business. If you think, oh my God, you look at the number of socially minded enterprises. I'm not talking about people who put out banners about how they are socially minded. I'm talking about real socially. I can say that with hand on heart, Macat is a socially minded enterprise, because we are there to make better thinking, and we have a specific way of doing that, and we have a specific way of measuring that. And it has been taken by the OECD as the assessment not only of critical thinking, but also of critical thinking and creativity, which are going to be very, very influential in the next part. It's a very complex question, and I feel I did not do it justice, but these are just some small seeds of ideas, because, you know, one thing to consider if in a question like this is to have, you know, when someone says this is a monocausal explanation, you are suspect. They're suspect already. This is a multi-dimensional, multi-causal explanation is required. And I feel like I've done a very bad job in just trying to answer that question. Not at least not as good as Rajan, but you know, we both tried. It's a difficult question, but we both had an attempt from very, very different perspectives. But the direction is, I believe, an attempt to try to answer the complex question and the complex mind behind the complex question as well, who's always challenging us.
Salah, thank you so much for the compliment, but my aim is actually to help people think and understand the dangers of commodification, of mass commodification, of interests and of people, of businesses, of skills, and the power of really understanding social and economic well-being and the drivers, the drivers and the motivators, and the need to think deeper and better and take responsibility of the impact of our actions, which actually propels my work or my life work, as Salah knows. And I hope our conversation created some food for thought. And I am thanking you both for this very enriching discussion. As you know, as an intercultural consultant, my goal is to bridge diverse perspectives and foster deeper understanding of how cultural contexts shape our thinking and interactions. So for this reason, I invited you both to share your thoughts and your insights with the communities we serve. To our audience, I would like to leave you with a little bit maybe thought-provoking question to you, dear viewers. How can you, in your own professional and personal lives, harness power of intercultural understanding to enhance your critical thinking and make a meaningful impact in your community? And how can we, Salah, Rajan, I, and my fellow consultants, help and educators help? So we would love to hear your own stories of cross-cultural collaboration and how it has shaped your journey. Please share your experiences with us and let us learn from each other's insight. For those interested in diving deeper into these topics, feel free to reach out to me or to Rajan or to Salah. Thank you so very much for attending